Shows your face anyway. Okay, so Dad.
We've done
Yeah. Yeah, recording. So Dad, I'm just a bunch of neurons. Billions and billions and billions of them. But I'm just a bunch of neurons. And so I was thinking that when we talk about the mind, knowing that it's a bunch of neurons, a bunch of neuronal pathways interacting, we should borrow some of the concepts from neuroscience. So for instance, you know there's a neuron that can be excited, right? Or inhibited by the previous neuron, right? Which sends a chemical message across the synapse. Well, not a chemical message, it sends neurotransmitters across the synapse, which are going to have an effect on the charge of the cell. And if it gets the right inputs, then that will activate the impulse, the action potential, and it will communicate with the next cell, okay? And so what you have is, with a neuron, what you have is a whole bunch of neurons feeding into the neuron that we're talking about. Some of them are going to be exciting it, some of them are going to be inhibiting it, and then whatever the sum is determines whether or not the neuron we're talking about has an action potential, which means it activates, and then talks to the next neurons, having either an inhibitory or excitatory effect on the next neurons. Okay, well, knowing that our mind is the brain, that we are these neurons, let's borrow some of these concepts. So our first word here is slap. So if, for instance, we talk often about the in-group, out-group bias. So let's talk about that as a voice. The in-group, out-group bias is a voice. It is one of the brain mechanisms, one of the elements of the mind. If I see someone who I consider a member of the out-group, that's going to slap my in-group, out-group voice. Right? Okay. Now, so slap means that it's like, boom, in-group, out-group voice, do your thing, have your effect. Okay, so you are affecting a voice by slapping. Now, maybe you're not, with one go, affecting the voice. Maybe you're just hyping it, you're exciting it, right? So in neuroscience, we say excite and inhibit. Mm-hmm. Well, here we can say hype. Mm-hmm. You know, oh man, the way when he talked about his home country, or when he talked about his religion that's different from mine, that was starting to sort of hype my in-group, out-group bias, I think. It didn't fully like slap it to the point where I was just like wanting to reject this guy, but it was starting to hype that voice. Okay. The opposite of slap is pulse. When I got to talking to him and I learned all these things we had in common, I think that really pulsed my in-group, out-group voice. Or we have pi. When I found out that we had gone to the same university, even though we were from different countries and blah, blah, that kind of pied my in-group, out-group voice. And then you have priming. Priming is basically when a voice is prepared to activate. Mm-hmm. So it's there, it's on standby, it's ready. So it's not totally dormant. It knows that it could be called upon. Okay, that's priming. And so what we say is tick. You know, we were getting along so well, and then, because he's brown, so I thought we were like the same until I saw his parents. I realized he's a whole nother brown. I'm just going to say, I think at that moment, I didn't experience anything. I don't think my behavior changed or anything, but I do think it was at that moment that my in-group, out-group voice was ticked. And then when he started using certain language that wasn't familiar to me, certain vocabulary, expressions, idioms and stuff, that started to really hype my in-group, out-group voice. And then when I found out that he was a Sox fan and not a Cubs fan, oh, that slapped that in-group, out-group voice. He was no longer a friend of mine. And there you go. Good?
Good.
All right.